he thinks of the final outcome. James Paterson, thanks for your time. You were one of those concerned about the original superannuation package. Are you entirely happy with where it's landed?
I'm very pleased, and full credit to the Treasurer and his team on this. They listened and they've heard us and they've heard our constituents who raised concerns about the package, and what they've come up with I think is a significant improvement on what we took to the election. It really rewards aspiration and it gives people the best chance possible of having a really comfortable retirement income.
Should this consultation have happened before the election?
Well, I mean, it was a budget policy, and there's only a limited amount of consultation you can do on a budget policy in the modern world without it becoming completely public. So I understand.
Is this an inevitable problem going from budget straight into election?
Perhaps it was, and I think in an ideal world no one would have designed this year the way it's been, but that was just the calendar the way it was, and so I don't begrudge the way it was done. And I think the really important thing now is that yes, I think we acknowledge that the election policy wasn't perfect, but we've improved it, and now we've got a really good policy.
It will mean that people can put in more than $500,000 after tax into their superannuation account. A lot of people look at that and think, well, I'd be lucky to get $500,000 before tax into my superannuation account. It's still a pretty generous system.
I think it is a generous system, as it should be, because what we want to do is give people the best opportunity to provide for themselves in retirement. There's a group of people out there who will be right on the edge as whether they'll be reliant on, say, a part pension in retirement or fully reliant on their own super savings. We're giving them the opportunity to not be reliant on the pension at all and to provide for their own retirement, and that's why I think this is a good package.
And will that $100,000 annual cap on how much you can put in each year after tax, do you think many people will breach that? That's going to trouble too many people?
I don't think so, and I think the really important thing is, say you're 55 years old, you've just finished paying off the mortgage, finished paying off the school fees, and you've got a modest super balance. Well, if you're able to, if you've got the cash to do it, you can put in $100,000 of non-concessional contributions every year for the next 10 years of your working life, and that's a $1 million top-up to your super. That's an amazing thing that you can now do that you wouldn't have been able to do under the previous system.
The trade-off for getting rid of that $500,000 cap is that older workers between 65 and 74 won't get the generous treatment they would have under the original package.
Well, not older workers, older retirees. So the status quo is that right now, if you want to put in money between the age of 65 and 74, you have to meet a pretty modest work test. We're just going to keep that. In the original policy, we proposed to get rid of that, so a non-working 65 to 74-year-old could still make contributions. But I actually think it's quite sensible that if you're a person who is aged in that bracket and can make generous super contributions, I don't think it's too much to say that you should be working if you want to be making it in a concessional way.
The other trade-off is delaying by a year the so-called catch-up contributions provision for people particularly mums who've been out of the workforce for a while. Any regrets that they're going to have to wait a little longer?
Well, I think that's a really good provision. It's a really important thing that you're able to catch up. That's important. But I think delaying it by 1 year is really not here or there. I mean, we are designing super policy for 40 or 50 years' time, and no one's going to look back and say, gee, I didn't have 12 months to take up on that catch-up provision. Obviously, we would like to be able to make it as generous as possible, as early as possible, but we've got budget constraints, and this policy has to cover itself, and it has.
A couple of other quick ones. Pauline Hanson's first speech, you were there in the Senate for that last night. What did you think?
It didn't reflect my values or my views, but I think she deserves to be heard. And I have to say, I think the Greens' stunt of walking out on her speech was pretty cheap. I mean, do the Greens want the Senate to be a safe space where there has to be trigger warnings if offensive things are going to be said? Frankly, some of the things that the Greens say I find offensive, but I'm not so precious that I can't sit there and listen to it.
But it's interesting that there's more condemnation of the Greens for walking out than Pauline Hanson for saying Muslims aren't compatible with Australia, that there should be a ban on all immigration, there should be a ban on mosques and burqas and so on.
David, I'm happy to condemn Pauline Hanson for all of those things. I think we live in a wonderful, liberal, pluralistic society, and one of the best things about that is the religious freedom we have and the freedom to worship. It's a really important thing, and that's why I don't agree with Pauline Hanson's views at all. But I think it is an important point to make.
Are they dangerous? Would you go that far?
Look, I think she represents people who have genuine concerns, and it would be dangerous for those people to not have their concerns reflected. So we do need to reflect their concerns. But I think she could go about it in a more sophisticated and nuanced way. She's very blunt in the way she says things and doesn't leave much room for error, and I think that is problematic.
All right. Senator, thanks for your time.
Thank you, David.